Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of News Today. We are going to discuss the news items for 26th of July. Whatever significant developments have happened, and whatever terms, whatever concepts we need for that from the point of view of the UPSC exam, we're going to talk about that. I'll first give you an idea of the main news which we are going to be covering today. So, first of all, we're going to talk about the PM of India visiting Maldives, marking the 60th anniversary of India Maldives diplomatic relations. Then, the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting directs intermediaries to block 25 websites hosting obscene content. After that, this because the parliament session was in news, there is a lot of development happening in that. So first week of monsoon session washed out amidst disruptions of parliament. Then we also have one new test of Indian Railways. So Indian Railways successfully tests India's first hydrogen powered coach at the integral coach factory. After that, you have the parliamentary standing committee releasing reports on regional rapid transit system. Then the last main news of the day is the Supreme Court issuing guidelines to address student suicide and mental health issues in educational institutions. Along with this, there are some quick updates which also need your attention. So we are going to talk about the president's rule. Then there's one government scheme, the Atal Pension Yojana. After that, one development in defense. The UAV launched precision guided missile. After that, there's an environmental concept, climate tipping point, E3 countries. Then we're going to talk about mycorrhizal fungi, Cropic. This is a new mobile application which is there. Then Doklam. And in the places in news, today's highlight is going to be the Democratic Republic of Congo. So let's start. We'll talk about all of these one by one. The first news item is on the Prime Minister of India visiting Maldives. And this is the 60th year of the India-Maldives diplomatic relationship. So the significance of this is coming from the point that a little while ago, India was talking about not being involved in Maldives politics. And if you remember, the Prime Minister had actually gone to Lakshadweep to talk about how tourism from Maldives could be directed to Lakshadweep. So in the light of that, this particular meeting is very, very significant because since that there was not a lot of engagement which was happening between India and Maldives. So from there, now this meeting is, you can say that this is on a path of repairing things. So we have to understand why Maldives is so important for us. So this is India, and here you have Maldives. So this is positioned in your Indian Ocean, and you can see it's somewhere in between. So if I have to talk about its placement, so we can say this is your West Indian Ocean, which is going to connect, which is going to connect us to Africa. And here we can say this is the East Indian Ocean, which is now going to be linked here to Malaysia and other Southeast Asian countries. So we have South Asia here. So Maldives is in a location where you can say it's like a checkpoint between both these regions. So for that reason, whenever we look at Maldives, we always mention it's a very, very strategic location. From the point of view of India, the strategic significance comes from trade. Like most of the trade which happens, most of the exports and imports, the international trade which is happening for India, that's happening through sea routes. And a lot of that is going to come through this region. So this is your main sea route.
Now you need to be friends with this country, Maldives. So because that trade path, the communication line that involves the presence of Maldives. So it's a strategically significant partner. We can also talk about this geopolitical angle where it's important for communication lines also. And from India's foreign policy perspective, we have a policy of neighborhood first. Our Prime Minister has been emphasizing this from the beginning of his tenure that we want to give a lot of emphasis to our neighbors. We want to strengthen this whole region, and Maldives is a neighbor, so it becomes a part of that strategy that we want to have cordial relations. There are other ideas also, like you have the Mission Mahasagar, which is there, which talks about alliances with a lot of these different coastal countries, so that strategically we can be a unit. There are perceived threats also here, like one way or one place where we want to be allied, where we want to be connected is security, counter-terrorism, issues of piracy which come up, and maybe taking on a common issue, which is one issue which I can highlight is the presence of China here. So China is also trying to develop links. There's the idea of string of pearls, which is there, where it's trying to create bases. So alliances like this will, in that sense, hold a lot of significance. So Maldives is a very important partner for us. So resuming this particular relationship again is going to be very fruitful. There are a lot of key agreements which came in with this meeting, and I've highlighted a few of those agreements for you. So first is a line of credit. Okay, there are economic ties, there is economic engagement. India also gives financial aid, loans also, but here they are strengthening this as a mark of that reassured friendship. Another key thing which is happening is enabling of UPI in Maldives. So you all know about India's payment gateway, UPI, and it is now going to be valid in Maldives also. And there is a lot of transaction. There are a lot of memorandums of understandings also which are being placed on this slide. But this is going to be a very big step. So Indians, when they'll go there, they'll be able to use UPI for their transactions. And as such, a lot of Indians do visit that. It's a very super hit tourist destination. Then there are MOUs in other fields like fisheries, aquaculture, meteorology, then digital public infrastructure, Indian pharmacopoeia. So all of these things, when you sign a memorandum of understanding, that is like a first step towards building on to something more concrete or working together in those areas. Then you have two Arogya Maitri Health Cube or Bhishma. So this we are sending to Maldives. This is a very significant development, a very interesting development also. This is like a modular hospital. India has designed this modular hospital where you have cubes. There are different cubes in which equipment is placed to be able to assemble that whole thing and create a hospital. So this is being designed to work in disaster locations or where you cannot really have medical facilities or medical facilities are not available. So in emergency use like that, this is seen as revolutionary. And India has sent two of these as a gesture to Maldives. Okay. So this is about the first news item. We'll move on to the next one. Okay. So Ministry of Information and Broadcasting directs intermediaries to block 25 websites hosting obscene content. So there are some websites, there are some applications. I'm sure you're familiar with the idea of different OTT platforms. So a lot of the these are seen to have content which is obscene, which is vulgar, and because of that, your Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, which is in charge for all of these things, they have blocked, they've decided to ban 25 of these websites. Now, when such a ban happens, the idea which you have to keep in mind, right? Like think about it from the exam point. The basic question which comes in conflict is freedom of free speech and expression. Now, is this a violation to that? If not, what are the constitutional provisions which allow this to happen? So you need to have that constitutional backing to understand why this is a valid ban. So these are the laws which have been violated. You would know about a lot of these laws, like the IT Act is there. So under the IT Act, you have Section 67 and Section 67A of the IT Act of 2000. Then you have the Section 294 of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. Now, this section specifically says that freedom of speech cannot be protected against obscenity. Okay, if there is some obscene content, that cannot be considered as a way of freedom of speech and expression. So that will actually supersede it, that you cannot do that. So this is specifically mentioned here. Then you have Section 4 of the Indecent Representation of Women for Revision Act of 1986. See, women are a very big target or hold a very big place in these obscene and vulgar content. Sometimes this content goes as far as, you know, being pornographic to an extent, and women are one of the key characters in that. So this act of indecent representation of women also would qualify here, would also be a part of this whole thing. Now, reasons for this ban. Okay, so I brought you the idea, and of course, there is one constitutional provision also which we are going to be using here. Whenever you write UPSC answers of this kind, if you can write and mention articles, that gives a lot of weight to your answer. Like here, the article which we're using it from Fundamental Rights. So this is the Article 19, Freedom of Speech and Expression. This article has a provision, 19 subpart 2, which says it allows the state to impose reasonable restriction on free speech in the interest of decency and morality. So Article 19, it is for freedom of speech and expression, but it is not an absolute right. When I say not absolute right, that means you cannot claim that to be higher than everything. It will not be provided in all situations. Here, this is specifically a part of the Act, that there can be reasonable restrictions if there is an interest, there is a need to do it for the sense of decency, for the sense of morality. Further, the arguments or the rationalization is protection of women. I've already told you about women, the whole anger of abuse and vulgarity claims are quoted from the aspect of women. And for children, it is more of a developmental issue. Being exposed to these content, these kind of contents, children might be exposed to things which are beyond their age, and in early formative years the impressions which you have, that leads to lifelong ideologies. They might have different interpretations of gender roles, of gender inequality, and objectification is one aspect which is very, very significant and which can really damage the whole social outlook of a child. So to protect them, it's important that such content is not available out there. Then there's this argument that obscenity erodes cultural and moral values. So the society has some rules, the society has some ideas which are culturally, morally significant to us. Okay, and they need to be protected. So you have to look at things from the viewpoint of a society. So somebody is, let's say, producing a content, that's one person, but it has, let's say, a damaging impact on 1 million people who are probably watching that content. So when you compare that, you have to outweigh that one person's, freedom of speech to the idea of cultural and moral integrity of all those people. You cannot do harm to that greater group of people, and that is where the justification of this comes. Okay, so arguments which probably will be against the ban would talk about freedom of speech. There might also be an argument which might talk about subjectivity, that how do you quantify it, what qualifies as obscene. But here there are provisions in a lot of different acts through which it can be justified on the other side, and hence these 25 websites are going to be blocked. Then we go to the parliamentary news, what's happening with the parliament. So the first week, so we have the monsoon session in place. So the first week of the monsoon session washed out amid the disruptions in the parliament. So the topic which we are going to be discussing is parliamentary disruptions. So parliament in the 1950s, it was meeting for more than 100 days. Now the parliament is very, very, the number of days it's meeting or it's working, it has become much less. So 60, 80, that's the range in which we usually have the parliament working. Now this less number of days is usually because of disruption. Some walkout has happened, some process has happened, or they've assembled, but there is no debate which is happening because of some protest or something, some form of disruption which is there, and that means no legislative work, no actual work is being done. Let's try and understand what are the reasons for this disruption. So the reasons here, the first one would be the opposition parties use it to gain greater publicity and visibility. See, Parliament has forums for all kinds of discussions. Okay, so if there's a bill also which is, let's say, supposed to be passed, then all parties, opposition parties, the government, they'll all get a chance to say. But this way, when you disrupt, it's highlighted more, right? You must have seen a lot of images where, the members of parliament, they're just going and hogging the speaker's space and trying to get his attention, and all of that is recorded, so it gets you a lot of public attention. So that could be one reason. Then there's this idea of the anti-defection law. This is in a sense a paradoxical thing. See, there are provisions which we say party whips. Political parties are supposed to vote on issues as one unit. Okay, like suppose there is an issue, of interaction between India and US. Okay, some agreement is there. So some people will support that agreement, some might not support it. But irrespective of their personal views, when there is a voting happening on a particular issue, you have to follow what your party says. So that is called a party whip. So if the party says we are against this, every member works in that same direction. They have to vote in the similar way. Now, this in itself is a infringement on the personal viewpoints of a person, of a member of parliament. And that can lead to frustration, that can lead to conflict, that can lead to disruption because they're unsettled. And because on different issues, you can have and you should be allowed in that sense to have different opinions. But under this anti-defection law. See, anti-defection law was actually brought up with the idea that you cannot defect from a party, You cannot form a different party. You cannot, break away from a party even on specific issues. So to make that kind of more secure, that the party views, the party setup, it is aligned. This was brought in, but now in this sense, with the kind of disruptions we see, it looks like it is a counter move in that sense. Then disruptions arise from controversial national or regional issues. Sometimes the issues are not legislative. Sometimes the issues are not really associated with what is happening in the parliament or what the job of legislators is supposed to be. Let's say that there's an accident which has taken place, a railway accident which has taken place. So the disruption would be about that we want the Prime Minister to come and give a statement. Okay, the Prime Minister, let's say, is not there or is not ready to make a statement on the floor of the House. So in that revolt, the House might be shut down. Okay, so a lot of these controversial regional or national issues, like that could, again, the point is you want to take it, you want to give it more attention, public attention, so that will cause disruption. And increase in political parties means less debate time and more disruptions over unlisted issues. So this is another thing. We have a lot of political parties, that means a lot of views, everybody wants attention. That means that formal debates will get less and less time, because if you have to allow everybody to speak, you'll have less time, and ultimately that will lead to more disruption. Okay, so because of these reasons, we are seeing a lot of disruption, and the parliament is working less because of that. Now, what are the issues with this? If you are having a lot of these disruptions, like this, have mentioned that Lok Sabha worked only 88% of its scheduled time, and the 17th Lok Sabha, and the Rajya Sabha worked only 73%. So, what is the issue? What is the problem here if we are having disruptions? First is weakening democratic accountability. So the parliament is actually a forum through which the opposition parties can draw accountability from the government. The government, for its actions, will need to explain things. They'll have to answer questions. That's why this whole thing is set up. Now, when you don't do that, when you have limited time and you have legislations and everyday work which is supposed to be done, that means this democratic accountability, that's going to be weak. That's going to reduce that answerability which the government has. That's going down. Then, of course, there's monetary cost. It's expensive. This article talks about how 1 minute of the parliament being conducted takes 2.5 lakh rupees. That's the cost of running that whole system. So, if you're losing that time, okay, if there is a disruption, you're not getting any work done, you're just sitting and shouting there. So, that is leading to monetary cost. Then eroding public trust in the parliament. The people are viewing all of this, and the people are also coming up with this perception that we can't really trust this system. If they're passing a bill, they have not really discussed it properly. They have not heard everybody's views. There were no elaborate discussions. The voting probably did not happen. Probably it was maybe a voice vote which happened. So there are a lot of questions which come up, and this, you can say, on the whole weakens the idea of democracy. If the people lose interest, if the people lose faith in the system, that is probably the worst thing a democracy can face. So because of this, the issue of disruptions is being highlighted here. There are also a few suggestions which we can mention. Most of the times in an answer in your exam, specifically if I'm talking about the mains exam, the answer will make sense if you can just conclude it with a suggestion. What you understand as way forward, we can talk about that, okay, this is something which can be done. So when you're preparing different topics, always keep this in mind. So you understand the problem, you know why the problem is happening, and you always look for solutions. So here the solution is ensuring dedicated time for the opposition. So this is something which as an example, has been taken from the British Parliament. So what they do is they have a dedicated number of days assigned in an year that, okay, these days are only for the opposition. So opposition decides the agenda, opposition decides what we're going to talk about. So that will, solve the problem of opposition trying to disrupt to get more time on its issues, on its topics. Then strengthening the ethics committee. So we have ethics committee, we have mechanisms in place, but we need to reinforce them properly. Then you have an annual parliamentary calendar. So this could be something like you plan for the whole year. These are the number of days which the parliament is going to be working, so that it provides less flexibility for disruptions and for delays or other such things. So if you plan for the whole year, it will be you can say better followed by everybody, and we can have more effective working of the parliament. With this, we can move to our next article. Indian Railways successfully tests nation's first hydrogen powered coach at an integral coach factory. So here it's a test. That means it's an early stage. We've not started using anything, but there is a plan that you're going to have 35 hydrogen driven coaches in India. And the design which they are creating, the design for the hydrogen engine, the propulsion system which they are creating, that is believed to be the strongest one, the best one for any hydrogen engine anywhere in the world. So technically, this is a very, very significant move in terms of technology advancements. It's a very advanced move. Let's understand this concept of hydrogen as a fuel. What are its benefits? Now, hydrogen, basically, burning of hydrogen will happen with oxygen. All fuels which are there, if you're burning wood also, it's burning in oxygen. But here, the fuel is hydrogen. And this hydrogen fuel will burn and give you water. The best thing about hydrogen as a fuel is that the byproduct is water, which is a very, very safe thing. For all other fuels, the problem is like if you're burning fossil fuels, the challenge is you have a lot of carbon emission. You have a lot of other gases also, sulfur gases, you have methane. All of these are polluting the environment. And of course, they are non-renewable sources. That means they'll also exhaust. Coal will exhaust probably in the next 250 years. So in that sense, hydrogen looks like a very promising idea. We can think about sustainable development by using hydrogen as a fuel in different areas. What are the benefits of this? First is it is higher energy density. That means one unit can give you a lot of energy. So you can easily transport it, and that will work for a longer unit of time. That is energy density. Then this I've already told you, water. So there is zero direct carbon dioxide emission. Carbon emissions are almost, there is no carbon emission. Then in terms of engines, in terms of integrating it with the existing system, like you're putting it into a railway coach, this is capable of running with the existing railway tracks with minimal attachments. Like you don't need a lot of overhaul. Of course, with a new kind of engine, some adjustments you will have to do, but you will not need to create an entire line of infrastructure. You'll just have to add something. So this is a very big opportunity. It creates a possibility where it's going to be capable of running on existing railway tracks. So looking at these benefits, we have created or we've tested this new hydrogen powered coach. But of course, with technology adaptation, there are limitations. Let's talk about limitations or what are the problems in doing this. The first one is that there is a limitation of green hydrogen production. Now, what is this green hydrogen? See, we are saying we're going to use hydrogen, but where is this hydrogen going to come from? One way is you take water Okay, and you break this down. So you will basically electrolyze it. Okay, it'll break down and it'll give you hydrogen. Now, how you electrolyte this to run, and you need an electrolyzer to run that electrolyzer. What kind of fuel you'll use, right? You need some electricity to do that. That decides the kind of hydrogen. The green hydrogen which is there, the green hydrogen would use the electrolysis process, but when we use the word green, it means it's going to use renewable energy. Okay, like solar, wind, those kinds. Renewable energy is going to go into this. So we want the whole thing to not emit any carbon. So when you do that, that is your green hydrogen. Currently, we don't have a lot of provisions for producing this green hydrogen. For India, this is a very important thing. You have a national green hydrogen mission also. So we want to create it, but currently we don't have the infrastructure for that. We don't have machines which will do this electrolysis using renewable energy. So we are a little behind in this. Currently, how we are producing hydrogen, we are producing what we call gray hydrogen. So gray hydrogen is what uses methane. And this is a greenhouse gas. It will use conventional fuels also. So this in that self is not a very clean process. This we have, but we want to use green hydrogen. And for that, we don't have the setup as of now. The other thing is lack of auxiliary infrastructure. Like I was telling you that we can use the existing tracks, but you'll need some attachments. You'll need some upgradation of that infrastructure. Some auxiliary infrastructure is needed, and currently you don't have that. The last point here is there is no definitive map for the extent of hydrogen adoption in Indian railways. Here the issue is with the demand. See, if you want people to produce more hydrogen, if you want more availability of hydrogen, they need to have an idea that how much will this grow in, or how big this will become from the point of view of the railways. There's no such plan. There's no such roadmap. Currently, they've started up. There's a test plan. They've talked about 35 coaches. Okay, but that is a very small number. That doesn't really drive production. That doesn't really lead to development. If they had a better sense of, like, maybe 30% of, or 40%, or let's say 50% of all railway coaches in India in the next 10 years, in the next 20 years will be run on hydrogen fuel, then that's something which creates interest from a lot of parties, and that's what generates demand. But currently, we don't really have an idea about that. So that's another issue. We can move on to the next article. So this is Parliamentary Standing Committee. Okay. So Parliamentary Standing Committee releases report on Regional Rapid Transit System. So you have to understand what is this regional rapid transit system. Basically, it's a train, a railway system. So here you will have a high frequency, high connectivity, semi-high speed, and it will be connecting regions around a city. The regional rapid transit system means, like, the idea is like connecting Delhi to Ghaziabad and Meerut, to have like a regional network of transportation. That idea has been there. It's been tried for Delhi. It'll expand to other places also, like Panipat, Sonipat, all these places around Delhi. They can all be incorporated and connected through a high frequency rail network. Now, the parliamentary committee has been evaluating this whole thing, and they've given a report. Before we can look at their recommendation, let's understand the need for this. Why do we need this regional rapid transit system? So the need is, of course, going to come up with addressing urban congestion. If you don't have these trains, you have the road. People would be traveling through road, and road travel leads to congestion. It leads to having a very high travel time. People are stuck for long hours for going to work. So if I am to travel 2.5 hours every day in one direction and then go back 2.5 hours, my productivity through the day when I'm actually sitting and working will be very low. As compared to if I had a comfortable train, which will probably let me cover that distance in, let's say, half an hour or 40 minutes, my productivity, my whole life will become a lot easier. And in big cities, this travel time is a very, very big problem. Then, equitable regional development. If you have these connectivities, people from Panipat can come and work in Delhi, people from Meerut can come and work from Delhi. They don't have to physically move also. They have a very good network, trains are there. I can set up a business. I can set up my manufacturing in Sonipat, and then I can have that kind of access to the main city. So, not just the city, like people come to cities, people migrate to cities because of better opportunities. But here, you are kind of creating a situation with this regional communication system, transportation system, where there will be equitable regional development. The city only will not be the one who will be working, but the whole region as such. Now, what has the committee specifically told us about this? Okay. So these are the standing committee's recommendation. There are a lot of good ideas which you get from such reports, which you can yourself write, where you're writing, let's say, a way forward or a solution to a problem. So setting up of a unified metropolitan transport authority by state governments. So they should have a dedicated authority. They have to make some plans. Then, like when the Delhi Metro came in, there was a dedicated authority to manage that. So on similar lines, they have made this suggestion that say some governments should set up unified metropolitan transport authority. Then plan big cities in regional context for smooth integration. That because this is a regional idea, you just don't talk about Delhi, but you talk about the whole thing: Delhi, Ghaziabad, Meerut, and then on the other side, Sonipat, Panipat, and all the adjoining regions. The plan should incorporate all these places. And of course, multimodal integration. So, airport, railways, bus stands, right? So, somebody has to go from that train station to his office also. So, there should be a bus available for that. There should be some public transport available to that, because then also then only that transport becomes seamless. So, the committee says when you talk about this, it has to be an integration through multimodal plans. All right. We go on to our last main news of the day. The Supreme Court issues guidelines to address student suicides, issues of mental health in educational institutions. Now, see, this is a very, very big issue and a very sad issue also. Around 7% of all suicides happening in India are happening in students, and a lot of that is related to their results. The pressure of career, not being able to qualify, failing exams. That is very strange. And we find children who are very young, right? Fifth standards, sixth standards are also sometimes, exposed to such a situation. So the court has been listening to these kind of cases, and Supreme Court has issued guidelines because they think that this is a problem in our structural educational system. This is a structural problem. There's something very wrong which is happening, and there's some inbuilt pressure in the system because of which we have increased number of student suicides. And even when suicides are not there, their mental conditions are not really optimum. So to manage that, they have brought some guidelines. Now, the guidelines which are brought up by them, they are supposed to be followed everywhere. Okay, they're covering all kinds of educational institutions, and these provisions of the Supreme Court, they also mention that until there is a law, this is the law. Okay, until you have a formal thing, so this is like a compulsory thing which has to be followed. Now let's go through this. What are the mandatory mental health policy for educational institution? So they must have a mental health counselor. This should be emphasized as a separate idea that yes, mental health counseling is needed. Then they talk about prohibition of batch segregation based on performance, public shaming, and unrealistic academic targets. And I think this has been there from time immemorial, like right from school, they divide children. That A section is going to be the most people who score high marks, and B section less, C, D, like that. So people who are probably in section D, they know that we are not been performing academically well. So this is like a way of public shaming which creates that stress. So this should not be done. Then the staff also should be equipped to handle the kind of stress children are facing. So if we have now observed that children are in stress, then they say that the staff must undergo biannual mental health training. Should be equipped to handle that. Then they have also talked about many other aspects which could be linked to mental health issues, like not just the academic part, but other things also. Like institutions should adopt inclusive, non discriminatory mental health practices for all of the groups. So, scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, other backward class. Like in school, also there's a dedicated quota for economically weaker sections, then LGBTQ plus and disabled students. So for them, extra attention is needed, and then a confidential reporting system for sexual assault, ragging, bullying. These are also big issues which are many a times which end up in suicide, and identity-based discrimination. Along with this, there is a need for promotion of interest-based career counseling, and not everybody trying to become doctors and engineers. And extracurricular activities also have to be promoted. Okay. These guidelines are now going to be followed in all educational institutions in India. And there are some already existing legal provisions also. So you should know about that also. So you have a dedicated act for this, the Mental Health Care Act 2017. This explicitly talks about how mental health and getting mental health services or help in this regard is a matter of right which everybody must get. Then the Rights of Persons with Disability Act. Now this act of disability of 2016, this is now including mental illness or any kind of mental issue as a disability. The definition of disability they have updated to include mental illness. Then Article 21 of the Constitution. So Article 21 of the Constitution, right to life. See again, one more fundamental right is being put across here. So in that, the idea is that you don't just have to exist vegetatively like an animal, but you should have a life of dignity and a life of wellness. That inbuilds this idea of protection of mental health. And all these provisions in this particular case are dedicated to your students, and thus the mandate for the educational institution. Now let's look at the place in news. So the place in news here is the Democratic Republic of Congo. So this is an African country. It is been in news because there's a rebel group, M23, which has recently signed a ceasefire with Congo. So because of that, it's there. You can take a look at all the neighbors which are there. Rwanda is one country which is actually known to be responsible to be backing those rebels, and other countries also here. You can take a look. So then the quick updates, which bring you some new and interesting concepts. The first one is president's rule. So Manipur is going to have an extension on its president's rule. So president's rule was imposed in February after the chief minister resigned. There are two key provisions because of which the president's rule is applied. So this is a basically an emergency provision. The constitution also provides emergency provisions. So breakdown of constitutional machinery. This is Article 356. So first thing is there's breakdown of constitutional machinery, which is usually informed through a report of the governor. So if the president receives a report from the state's governors or otherwise is convinced that the state government cannot carry on governance according to the provisions of the constitution. So that's one way. Second thing is if they fail to comply with union directives, and that's Article 365. So a president's rule can be imposed in that condition also if the state fails to comply with directions given by the union on matters it is empowered to. Okay, so this basic sense of the president's rule you need. A deeper view into actual political developments, what BJP is doing, what other ministers are doing, what the Meteis, the main group, is doing there, that you don't need. But yes, the concept of president's rule, that's of course important. Then you have this government scheme, Atal Pension Yojana. So this has recorded a record number. There are some 8 crore people who've enrolled in this scheme. So this is a scheme for people of informal sector. Like formal sector does provide for some aspects of social security, but the unorganized sector, for them, there were no such provision. That's why this scheme is seen to be very significant. So it will address the longevity risks. The people are going to live longer even when they are not able to work. So that's an issue. And then lack of retirement security. So if they stop working, they would need some financial help because unorganized workers, okay, let's say a cook, plumber, or such people, they can benefit from this scheme. So this is under the Ministry of Finance. For all schemes, you must know that. Then implementing agency is the Pension Fund Regulatory and Development Authority. Okay, so once you enroll in this scheme, some monthly pension is going to be given to those people under the scheme. Next, you have a missiles. Any new equipment which is coming in, especially when it is indigenously designed, that this is by DRDO, that you should know about. In prelims, you can get a direct question on these things. So this is the complete name is going to be Advanced Unmanned Aerial Vehicle. I'm sure you understand unmanned aerial vehicle, something like a drone, right? So unmanned, there's nobody driving it, but yeah, it's an unmanned aerial vehicle, launched precision guided missile. So they've launched a new missile. This missile is advanced in the ways that it can work in day, it can work in night, it'll work on planes, it can work on hills also. So this is a significant creation of DRDO. Then climate tipping point. So you should know this concept. Let's try and understand what it's saying. These are critical thresholds in systems that, when exceeded, can lead to significant change in the state of a system, often with an understanding that the change is irreversible. So what it is trying to say is that the planet is facing challenges of climate change. Okay, and there are impacts of that, but there is a threshold up to which that impact can be tolerated. After that, there is going to be some change, some modification, and that change is the climate tipping point. It can be recorded as the climate tipping point, and that change will be irreversible. Like an example which they've explained here is that you have rainforests in Amazon. Rainforests, as the name suggests, would mean an area which is going to receive a lot of rain. But we are having climate change. We are having global warming. Temperatures are increasing. So, in that increasing temperature, when the conditions are becoming drier, they will reach a point, which we'll say a tipping point, that now vegetation in that, instead of the rainforest trees, will change to a drier vegetation, a savanna type of dry vegetation, a grassland type of vegetation. And that change is now irreversible. Of course, it will happen over a very long time, but once that happens, you mark that as a climate tipping point. Then E3 countries. The concept important is what is E3? E3 stands for UK, Germany, and France. It's basically an informal group of these countries, and they are talking about imposing sanctions on Iran. That's why they are in news. Sanction means some kind of banning that we'll not have trade with you, will not let your goods come in our country, or things like that. We'll not give you funds. Those are the kind of sanctions which are there. So they are afraid that there might be some nuclear armament used from Iran. So they are threatening that we'll impose sanctions on you. And for you, from this topic, all you need to know is E3 is UK, Germany, and France. Mycorrhizal fungi. Fungi or fungus, I'm sure everybody knows about. Now, there are some fungi which live on the roots of plants. It's a symbiotic relationship. Symbiotic relationship would mean it's a mutually helpful relationship. Fungi on the roots of the plants, they help the plant absorb water, they help the plant absorb nutrients better, and fungi get to use the food which plants produce, and of course a place to live. So these fungi, they are very significant because it helps the plant soak in nutrients such as phosphorus from the soil and play an important role in carbon sequestration. So they capture carbon dioxide, they help in that also, reducing the carbon dioxide levels. And this is in news because there are discussions that we are losing a lot of this. Whenever there is a nutrient deficient soil, that soil does not have a lot of nutrient, these kind of natural alliances can really help the plants to get more nutrition or to flourish properly. Because of environmental degradation, what we are finding is that a lot of these mycorrhizal fungi, they are dying. That's the idea. Cropic. So what a wonderful acronym this is. This is a collection of real-time observations and photos of crops. So crop pic exactly is crop and pic, a picture of the crop. So the idea is this is basically linked for insurance scheme. So you have the PM Fasal Yojana, Fasal Bima Yojana, sorry. So under this scheme, for insurance claims or for securing lands, you are going to take pictures, and these pictures will be analyzed over a period of time, let's say 5 to 6 times during the cycle of growth of a crop, and that will help in assessment of land. So there's an application which is being created specifically for this. This is like a real-time observation of crops. So this app has been created for that purpose. And the last thing in news is Doklam, and an idea which is talking about battlefield tourism. So if you've had war at some place, the site can be preserved and people might be encouraged or people might be interested to come and see that. So that's what is battlefield tourism. And Doklam is the latest place which is becoming a part of this tourism. Now, what happened in Doklam was that so this is somewhere in a region which you can say in a way has Bhutan. So there's China here, and then you have, of course, Sikkim in India. Now, what happened was the China started construction in this particular area, and this was Bhutan's territory. The construction was in happening towards Bhutan's territory, and India has a friendship alliance with Bhutan. So India stepped in to help Bhutan. That no, China, you can't do this construction. So that's the significance of this. You can look at it on the map, and maybe at some point you can go and visit this also. Now this is available for battlefield tourism. Okay. After listening to this class, please go through the news today again. You'll be able to absorb everything very nicely. And please make sure you solve the questions also. Solve your MCQs. And if you feel there's any topic you want to read more into it, you can visit our digital current affairs website. This will help you search individual topics and give you all the details which you need on a particular topic. With that, we'll end today's session. Thank you.